Welcome, everyone. This is Coaching in Session. My name is Michael Rearden, and I will be bringing in group number 4 of the podcast. If you're familiar with the podcast, we started the group episodes 2023. We are now in 2024, and we're going to be starting the year off with a bang. We have some of the best coaches and personal development people in the world with us today. We are going to be talking about their work and talking about a topic that you probably are thinking about every single morning when you wake up and you don't want to go to the gym. Personal development, self-help, self-care, whatever that means for you, we're going to be talking about that today. So let's bring in group 4 today. My first guest we're going to be talking about is Cynthia. Tell the world who you are, what you do, and then also tell them where they can find you.
Thanks for having me. So I largely help really busy, overwhelmed women, especially highly critical women, de-stress and express themselves through really simple mindfulness and art activities. And I do that through online workshops and retreats and teacher trainings. And I can be found at my website at mindfulcreativemuse.com.
Next is going to be Robert.
Hi there. My name is J. Robert Parker. I am the director of Twin Raven Solutions. I am a clinical hypnotherapist. Basically, my work is in creating change, whatever that change looks like for an individual. Everything is subconscious association. Everything is kind of, as I like to say, all in your head. And that's also where the solution is. So I work with the subconscious mind to help create the change, whatever that shape is of that change for people. And you can find me at twinravens.org.
Next is Maria.
Hello. Thank you for asking me to join you today. So I work in the world, very similar worlds to Cynthia and Robert. I work with people to help them manage stress, to help them liberate themselves from anxiety and unconscious consumption patterns. So I do a lot of work teaching, meditation, Ayurvedic lifestyle, breath work, etc. in the workplace. So in facilities and hospitals and businesses, as well as one-on-one transformational coaching.
And yes, we all do similar work, working with the unconscious, the subconscious. And that is why you are here. We're going to be diving into the topic of personal development, self-help, self-care, all of those. It doesn't necessarily matter the phrase you use, because I believe everyone has their own perfect phrase for them, the one they resonate with the most. But it's going to be a universal term for everyone in the audience to understand that this is what we're trying to bring to you today. We're trying to bring an understanding that you can do something amazing in your life. It's just that sometimes you need to bring some awareness into your life, into your own personal situation. And we're going to be starting with Maria today, because I loved our episode, Maria. We had a moment where we even did some meditation where people can take a step back and find who they are for a moment. Instead of living in such a busy world, we had a moment to slow down. And that was so powerful. Right now, people are trying to do so much. New Year's resolutions, they might have got 3 gym memberships. They're not going to go to either of any of those 3. We have to ask, well, if a person is giving themselves a goal, a dream, but yet they're not able to fulfill it, what's stopping them?
Well, I think a lot of times we set goals based on a very structured process that we've kind of learned through either our schooling or our work education or our surrounding mentors that aren't necessarily in alignment with what the heart wants. So a lot of times the goal setting's from the head, right? The mind and the intellect. And sometimes that isn't enough to really foster change if it's not aligned with what we want in our heart, or we can tap into those deeper desires. And so I think that becomes a challenge. I think we are in a world that is designed to pull us out of self, right? To outsource our health, outsource our life, really. And so there's such noise in the world that it's really important for us to pause and turn inward. And it's when we tap inward where we can access those more deep, heartfelt desires. And when we align those heartfelt intentions with then actual action plans and goals, the ability to make that change then becomes much more possible, right? So I think it's a big part of how we're setting goals, if we're doing it from the intellect only, or if they're aligned with the heart.
Mm. And who would you like to pass it to? And then ask your question to make it a little bit deeper too.
I'll pass it to Cynthia, and I'd love to expand on, I guess, maybe some feedback or experience you have in terms of, in your own life, in terms of tapping into the heart, right? To pursue something that you want to do in life.
So I find and have found for myself, when I set a goal and I end up hitting a wall and not moving forward with it, that there is a disconnect from the heart space, as you're mentioning. And also what I notice for myself and a lot of the students I work with is that there can be this really strong inner critic voice that comes through, and these very clear limiting beliefs that can hold us back. And I believe really separates us from our heart, from our desires of our heart, but also from that calling, from that part that we're feeling pulled towards. The inner critic is something that I focus on a lot in my own personal mindful art practices. And then in teachings, I largely have that focus with creativity, because I find so many people, especially when they're trying to create, have this strong internal critic that bubbles up of, I'm not good enough, or I'm not going to do it right. And I find it so interesting how pervasive those thoughts are outside of our creativity as well. You mentioned the gym membership or setting a goal around, improving our health and doing things. And so often I've set goals around that in my past, or knowing other people. And if we set a goal, but we also have, even though we have this perfect plan laid out, if we have this thought of, I can't actually achieve that, or better yet, I'm not the person that does those things. So if I don't have the identity of being that person that goes to the gym on a consistent basis, then there's just this extra barrier. Some people refer to that as in our heart space having a block. Other people can use different language. So I think there's so many different paths of support that people can find. And I think it's truly finding what feels nurturing for you that can, what I usually say with mindful art practices is that it's like a container, the safe container that we can then be held in and can notice what some of these thoughts are, what our limiting beliefs are. We have that extra space to then shift and think something differently and have our inner wisdom, or what I like to call our inner muse voice, come through in a supportive way. I think having alignment, giving space to hear what our heart has to say, and giving support for whatever way that looks like is huge.
Do you have a question for Robert that can really enhance what we're talking about today?
Yeah, I'm curious on this topic, especially with the work you do around hypnotherapy and NLP. We've been talking about the heart, but you mentioned earlier how strongly our brain and our subconscious and unconscious can really have an impact on our movement. And I'd love to just hear you speak a little more to that around this particular example of maybe setting a goal of going to the gym and not moving forward. So I'd just be curious about your take on that.
So in my world, kind of what you are speaking of is something called homeostasis. And that is essentially the expectations you put upon your reality. It is the reason that we better ourselves. It is the reason that we stay in situations that aren't necessarily healthy, because it is in that moment who we consider ourselves to be. It's a very powerful thing, because pretty much everything has to do with our perception, our assumptions of ourselves and the world around us. If we don't view ourselves as somebody that goes to the gym every day, if we still view ourselves as somebody that just hangs out and watches movies on the couch, trying to do that, it's not going to happen. You have to begin to view yourself as that. And this goes beyond just a theoretical concept like homeostasis. There is a physical part of your brain called the reticular activating system, and it does a few things. It regulates the transition to sleep, to trance, all of these different things, but it is also your mind's attentional filter. It determines what you notice at any given time. Because even right now, even all of you just sitting here, there are in reality hundreds, if not thousands of different things going on around you. Every individual hair on your body, the way your tongue feels in your mouth, the hair on your head, the shoes on your feet, all of these things that you're not aware of until I say something about them are just filtered out, because that's how you have to work. You cannot conceivably process all of that extra information. And so this reticular activating system exists to determine what you do and do not notice in your world. When it comes to setting a goal, the reticular activating system, something I call the RAS, is incredibly involved in that process. And we've all experienced it. Let's say, here's a common example. Say you buy a new car. Let's say you buy, a Ford Mustang, something like that. I'm not a car guy. My apologies. You will begin to notice on the road all these other Mustangs. And is the reality of the situation that there are suddenly more Mustangs on the road? Or is this something that you notice more because it is now in your reticular activating system as something that is to be noticed? And that's the answer. And so when it comes to setting goals, I'm not too big on goals, to be honest with you. I'm big on direction. When you have a positive direction that is heading towards something, you are open to something different. And the example that I like to give, let's say you are going for a walk and you are going to the store because you are hungry and you need to eat. All you're going to think about is that store. Your goal is store, and you're just going to go there thinking about food the whole time. You could walk that exact same path, that exact same direction, only knowing your path, your intent, and taking that moment to notice everything around you, taking that time to notice everything. You might notice a better option, something that works out better, something that wasn't going to work out, something that you wouldn't have noticed had you been hyper-focused upon that goal. And whenever you are heading in a direction, you are going to work towards what you want, but you are going to be open to opportunity.
I was thinking about, like, now we have tools for personal development. Think of vision boards. I don't necessarily like vision boards, but I can understand the concept and theory behind them. We give ourselves a picture, maybe of the house we want, the car we want, whatever it is that we're going for. Maybe we have notes of the things that we're trying to do, our goals. As we look at the vision board, we maybe are optimistic, but then at some level, we become realistic. It's like, can I get this $1 million mansion that I want? So now it's just like, maybe I can't. And then that vision board eventually is going to start packing dust. You're going to start to avoid the vision board. And before you know it, it's just another thing on the wall. So we give ourselves tools maybe for personal development, like a vision board, or we give ourselves a destination of fitness, or we say we are hungry and we're going to that store, we're going on that journey. But yet sometimes we lose focus. We kind of stray from it because maybe we get a little bit tired. Maybe it's raining on that day and we are like, oh, great. Now we have to have an umbrella. We can see less. Maybe we are worried about getting wet. We have so many things happening in our life at any given moment. As you said, Robert, now we have to focus on maybe some of the critical aspects. So I want to get into what should a person be focusing on in their life if it's not going to be their goal all the time. And I want to start with Cynthia.
So this reminds me so much of why I practice mindful art as just a foundational principle of loving the process more than the outcome. And not saying that the outcome doesn't matter or the final goal doesn't matter, but instead focusing on the actual process. And so in what we're talking about with this, that for me would look like, what are the particular small, simple actions I can take on a daily basis to continue to move forward? And I often talk about Kaizen Muse, the Kaizen Muse method or Kaizen Muse steps, where really it's focusing on what is an action that I can do in 5 to 10 minutes that's so simple that I can't not do it. I think the example that's really commonly heard and expressed around this is, if I want to start running, instead of having this huge plan, and I might still set up the plan, the first step might be, having my running shoes and setting them by the door or laying out my outfit the night before. And I see this so much with a meditation and creative practice as well, that there can be these hopes or intentions that we're going to jump into a meditation practice, or that we want to start doing a large painting. And there can be this really big barrier because that's not a habit that we already have for ourselves. And so instead, what I often talk about is you can take 3 mindful breaths when you're sitting at a stoplight. You can take a mindful breath when you walk through a doorway. You can focus on making 3 intentional doodle lines on your lunch break. Or, there's so many ways that we can focus on these really small steps that feel minuscule. And I've noticed for myself, anytime I've really started to gain momentum on a new habit that's outside of my comfort zone, it's through taking these really small steps. Because I'm doing those small steps, having a moment of like, oh, I did that. I set that particular goal or idea around this small step and I accomplished that. And it's like a snowball rolling downhill where you gain momentum, versus the other times when I've set a really large goal and I've focused on the end result and I'm setting myself up for failure and I'm not reaching those things. And then it's almost like the reverse effect. It's just solidifying that belief I have. And I'm the type of person that doesn't do those things. So I'm a huge fan on Kaizen Muse method, really small steps and really trusting and enjoying the process.
And how would you make that question deeper for maybe Maria?
Yeah. I know, Maria, you mentioned earlier that you do some coaching, but also Michael mentioned the meditation and having this moment of slowing down and spaciousness. I'm curious about your experience with this around goal setting and moving forward, but in a spacious way. And what might that look like? And how might people support themselves in doing that?
Well, I think the 2 huge outcomes from a meditation practice, once you become pretty dedicated to it, or even if you just tap into it on occasion, 2 big outcomes that I see is increased self-awareness and increased self-compassion. And I think those are really important when we're looking to make change, right? When we're looking to achieve a goal. And so how that creates spaciousness is if we're, in a habit of just an old school means of driving for a goal that's all intellect based, right? Here's my goal. These are the action steps. This is how I'm going to do it. Chances are we might also have a tendency to beat ourselves up if we don't make those steps, if we miss, if we didn't hit the gym that day or whatever it be. By cultivating, whether it's through a meditation practice or any similar practice where we're turning inward to really get to our truth and not what the world is presenting as, what your truth should be, but what your truth is, by turning inward, we can start to become really aware of our process in looking towards that goal when we come offline, when we kind of waver, and we can also through that become more self-compassionate. And I think self-compassion in general is such a, it's such a important skill that we are just not taught. And, along the lines of, you'd mentioned, kind of being detached from outcome, right? The law of detachment. If we want anything in the universe, we really have to relinquish our attachment to it in order to achieve it. So I think for me in my personal journey, having been one who really tried to control my trajectory for a long time and not rest and trust, it was that development of that meditation practice and that ability to turn inward on a daily basis that allowed me to rest and trust and release the attachment to outcome. And it's still, a daily process, daily work, right? We're all human. But I think we have the potential to really set ourselves up for success if we, in any goal we're looking to achieve, incorporate some self-compassion and some self-awareness in there. So, one, you kind of have to have one to get the other, right? It starts with awareness, and then from there you can really step into compassion.
And how would you enhance that for Robert?
For Robert, I'd love to kind of explore, you talked a little bit about the RAS, and I'd love to explore a little bit more about how that self-compassion muscle can be developed and how that translates to changes actually in the brain.
Absolutely. And I'm sitting here listening, and it's funny because many of the things that I talk about, I'm hearing each of you say in a different phrasing, kind of to step back a little bit, Cynthia talked about small steps. And one of the things that I always encourage is taking forward momentum no matter what it is. A little step forward is still a step forward. If you look back, how many times have we just blown off something because that's not enough. That doesn't do much of anything. That's just too small. Well, if you did all of those things that you blew off and said were too small, you'd end up quite a bit further along than you are right now. And so no matter how small it is, I always encourage doing it. Small steps, small impacts. It all adds up. As long as it doesn't take away, it all builds. I heard Maria talking about something interesting that I often speak of, and it's this idea of what we take as truth. And one of the things we don't realize is there's two truths. There's little t truth and big T truth. Little t truth are the things that we assume are true, the things that society, something external, has given to us. And we just believe it's true because it's there, it's present, it's a part of our world so commonly. And then there's the big T truths, the actual internal truths of yourself in the world around you that aren't really influenced by anything. It's just the nature of things, the nature of self. And kind of to answer Maria's question about how this filtering system in the mind works with this, it comes to a concept that I pretty much always speak on because it's where it all starts in truth. And that's self-talk. Quite simply, if you tell yourself you can't do something, your brain, the physical organ that is your brain, will do everything it can to prove to you that you can't. It will validate anything that you ask it to, positive or negative. It has no judgment. That's a function of the conscious mind. The subconscious kind of just is. It is there kind of doing what you ask it to and operating as it's used to. If you tell yourself that you can't, that you never will, etc., 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 right. You will see things that will validate that opinion. You will notice things in yourself and the world around you that will validate that opinion. Same goes as the opposite. That if you tell yourself you can, you will see things that will reinforce that. You will notice resources that you might not have noticed before. Your subconscious mind exists to make the thing happen, so to speak. The phrase I find myself repeating oftentimes is the conscious mind is the goal setter, the subconscious mind is the goal getter. You determine what you want consciously and you program it subconsciously. From there, things like your attentional filter, your mindset and thought patterns, all of these things change. Kind of to give a bit of a tip for what I give people as to how to do this, because it's not as simple as just changing the way you talk, even though it is, because it's a thing that has to be practiced. It's something that I still catch myself with every now and again. But there is kind of a little bit of a cheat code you can do, because that's what my work is, essentially, is the cheat codes in the subconscious mind. So there is a 30-minute period, give or take, in the morning. There's also one at night, but the one in the morning benefits this situation. And physiologically, neurologically, you are in trance, which means effectively, without going into this big long explanation of hypnosis, you are hypersuggestible, which is kind of what it sounds like. You take suggestion very easy. And there is one person in this world you are most suggestible to. It's yourself. Your mind will listen to you more than the most skilled hypnotherapist that exists. You are most suggestible to yourself. And so, if you are hypersuggestible to yourself, take advantage of that. Say supporting things to yourself. Do supporting activities. I have a hard time saying what these things should be because it is such an individual thing. Those things that I consider supporting towards my mindset and well-being might not be for somebody else. A good example of this is it's often considered good for your mindset, your mental mind to wake up and do a bunch of push-ups. No, absolutely not. Been there, done that. That does not make me a happy human. Not to say that's not good for me, but it's not how I reach my goals. And so a lot of my work is helping find what that motivator is, what helps your subconscious focus on that. And it all starts with how you talk to yourself in the morning. Do you wake up dreading everything that's going to happen? Because if you tell your subconscious mind, hey, today's going to suck, it's going to be hard, and we're barely going to make it, it'll just simply obey. It'll make it seem way harder than it necessarily is, and it will make that miserable. The opposite's also true. If you know you're going to have a hard day, support yourself, encourage yourself, have a positive outlook to that. Not unrealistic, but encourage yourself that you'll make it. Don't tell yourself everything's going to be fine if it's not necessarily going to be fine. Tell yourself that you have what it takes to make it through, that you're going to be better, that you're going to improve from this. Encourage yourself. It all starts with that, simply being on your own side.
The work that I do with mindset coaching basically stems from limiting beliefs, because if you know, Reven is just never turned backwards. It took me like 3 months to figure out the name of the business, because 2017 is on my soul journey. I was like, I want to do something. I had just left teaching, or I was in transition. I could go back to teaching, or I could do something different. I chose to do something different. And the reason why I chose to do something different wasn't because I didn't love teaching. I still love teaching. But what I saw in the schools was teachers, the system, whatever you want to call it, creating limiting beliefs for these young individuals, right? These young leaders. We can do so much better, right? If we look at the education system, it is 100 years old. It is outdated. We can do so much better. We can apply more art classes, music classes, get the mind moving in a different way. But yet that's the first to lose funding. So they'll take away art class, gym class, all of that because, oh, we don't have money for it, but let's give them more testing. So they'll do that before they give them an art, right? And it was heartbreaking to see that, because the kids love that 45 minutes a day that they got in art class, music class, or gym. We took away the things that they love. And children need 90 minutes of uninterrupted play a day. Yet we give them 20, 25 minutes, and it was raining. They're having indoor recess. It's a whole mess there. We have an outdated system, but yet we have new technology, new cars, iPads, iPhones. I mean, our phone has, I believe, more technology than on the first spaceship, because that is the way technology is moving. But yet this technology is inhibiting our freedom in the sense that we can be independent. Studies have recently come out that a child who spends more than an hour of time on a device, iPad, phone, in front of a TV, they have a more difficult time self-regulating. That means that they can't be by themselves without that device in front of them. They cannot control themselves without that device in front of them. They start losing it. They start looking for it. It's almost like an addiction. When we look at the flow of technology, what are some of the negative effects and maybe some of the positive effects that we can be looking at? And should we maybe take away technology from a growing mind and let that mind grow naturally with the ebb and flow of the world rather than what society is pushing? So again, society will push, oh, this app or this TV show. Think of Nickelodeon. They have a set of shows. They're always different. But yet you have a generation of Ninja Turtles, and then you have a generation of Paw Patrol. So we go along with the flow of society. Whatever is trending, whatever is new, all the kindergartners have the backpack of the shows they love. It's going to be different in 10 years. It's going to be different in 20 years. They follow the flow of society. So I wanted to pass that to Robert to get your take on technology, the flow of society, and then what it does to the mind.
Easy question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Where to even start with that one? Well, I guess the first place to start is you can't put it back in the box. Technology progress moves forward. You cannot put the thing back in the box, even if you don't like it. This exact same conversation was had about the ballpoint pen, about paper, about buildings, about everything. Every step of the way of human development, this question has been asked. It really boils down to, we don't really have a choice because this is the world we've created. Does technology have negative impacts? Absolutely. Our attention span is horrible. But you have a choice. Do you take that technology away and try to increase that person's attention? But you simultaneously do not prepare them for the world around them, because that world is that technology, like it or not. It is here. It is a thing. It is going to happen. I've lived long enough at this point to have heard this conversation a couple of times now at this point. I remember this conversation being had about laptops, being had about smartphones, being had about all of these toys that have come up in the past few years. Again, it goes back to, you just cannot put the thing back in the box. What you can do is recognize the negative factors of it, because as amazing of an invention of modern technologies we have, and I cannot overemphasize enough how often ignored of a miracle the internet is, the modern communications infrastructure. That is the greatest thing humanity has ever created. And it's such an everyday bland thing that we don't even think about it because it's just part of our world. It does have detrimental effects because, yes, on one hand, we do have access to absolutely everything, anything you ever wanted to know. I was both educated and work online from right here and help people from right here. And that is not something I could do without that incredibly complicated infrastructure. At the same time, I do notice a distinct change in people's ability to focus, people's ability to spend their free time wisely, and myself included. I mean, we all spend a bit too much time on our phone than we should, and I don't even want to do the math of what I could be doing in that time. It's just one of those things, and I have to remind myself that this conversation's been had before with television. This conversation's been had before with radio. This conversation's been had before about chiseling things into a rock. Because how are the kids going to remember anything if they can just chisel it into a stone? Back in my day, we just had to remember how to make fire. Progress moves forward. It's how it is. I don't love everything, but I am also not going to become old man yelling at sky. It is what it is. And all we can do is kind of turn inward a little bit. Look at ourselves, examine ourselves, because our society exists to be external. You are taught, trained, and raised to focus on external things. And it leads to a lot of detachment with yourself. Most people, if you walk up to them and ask them, what makes you happy? They can't answer it. They don't know. Because I have clients that one of the first things I ask them, what do you want? What do you want from working with me? I want to be happy. I want to feel happy. Okay. What does that mean? What does that mean to you? What makes you happy? And a stunning amount of people don't even know where to begin with that. And I guess that kind of all brings it back towards goals, really. Because the ultimate goal is what? To be happy, to have a positive existence. How can you want something you've not yet defined? If you don't know what makes you happy, if you don't even know the direction you want to point yourself in to try to find that. Like anything else, you have to kind of know where you're going. And the first step, I guess, to any goal to begin with, because the ultimate goal is a good life. Ultimately, if you just boiled it down, to have a positive experience in life, to find your happiness. What is it? What does that mean? And if you can answer that, then you can start to create paths and intents and goals. But if you don't know the answer to the first question, you're just going to be stumbling around the dark And you might find something, you might not. And it's better to not have to stumble around the dark. Figure out what it is that makes you happy, what the direction of your goals are, who you are. The self is a huge thing that we are generally not familiar with until we do so intentionally. I would wager to say the majority of people couldn't answer the question, who are you? And I don't just mean your name, I mean your occupation. Who are you specifically as an individual human meat person? Who are you? That question will baffle a vast majority of people. I like to change that. I like people who work with me to have a better sense of who they are. I guess the best way that I could transition that to somebody else is, let's see, Cynthia. With that in mind, that knowing who you are is important to finding out how to be happy. What is your perspective on that?
I love that question. I'm going to pause just for a moment because I just want to come back to the other question Michael was asking around our children and technology, and then I'll come back and answer that question, Robert, that you just posed. Ironically, earlier today, I just read an article in my local paper, and they did a study around digital technology and addiction for children. And they said that in the study they did, children under the age of 13 spent on average 5 hours on screens, and 13 to 18 spent on average 8 hours on screens. And that's outside of if they're on a computer for school. That's purely digital gaming, social media, just leisurely digital screen time. Part of me was shocked when I read that, and also not shocked when I read that, knowing my experience and working with other adults. And I work with a lot of K through 12 teachers in my teacher training. So they share with me a lot of what they're seeing with kids in schools. In this article, what they talked about is that the hippocampus, so what you were mentioning earlier, Michael, around our kids' abilities to self-regulate, that the hippocampus in the brain is directly impacted when there's too much screen time, and how so many of social media apps are specifically designed to have us become addicted to these technologies. I'm a supporter of technology in general as a tool. I think it's amazing. There's so many, I think of the last few years, especially with COVID, and it was amazing that we had technology where students still had support when they weren't going to schools, where I had students that I was connecting with via Zoom, and we were connecting all around the world. So I'm very grateful for technology. And I think especially for our young children and minors, that we do have some sort of responsibility to help safeguard them where, they don't have free reign to spend 8 to 10 hours a day on digital technology. And so I don't have any of the answers around that. And what I've seen is that analog ways that we can engage with our kiddos, have play, have them be outside, have them create art, have them do something where they're not, on a digital screen, has so many benefits that I think are often not spoken about. I wanted to share this really brief story. During the couple of years right after COVID, I had this online retreat that I did with largely adults where I was sharing really calming mindfulness and art practices. And I had one practice I shared where you would create color first in a journal with watercolors, crayons. You could use any material. I call it aqua tracing with watercolors, where you notice the shapes from the color on the page and you trace it. So it's almost like a reverse coloring book as a way to focus our attention. A mother that was in that group told me that she shared it with her son, who was 7 at the time, that kept having tantrums, that was having a terrible time focusing in school. And she said that he had asked her about this watercolor doodle that she made, and that he spent the next week going up to his room and creating his own. And she said that she saw a huge difference in him having less tantrums. I hear stories like that all the time from mothers that I work with, fathers I work with, teachers. And I'm excited to hear and know that there are a lot of schools that are bringing in more mindfulness and art activities, especially the last couple of years. I think we have so much more work and room that we that we can do for both adults and for our kiddos in the world. So I just had to chime in on that because I feel so passionate around it. And I just happened to read that article earlier today, ironically. But to your question, Robert, around really knowing ourselves, one thing, part of my practice with art journaling is not only making marks, but also having a process of making meaning of my marks as a way for me to have a deeper sense of who I am, what my thoughts are, what's coming up for me in the moment. And that's something that I feel really passionate around, that these practices can be a way that we can deepen our connection to ourselves much deeper than, I went to school for art and I could be a gallery artist and I could make pretty pictures, but that's not necessarily what I'm interested in. For me, I like to have that deeper layer of understanding kind of the inner workings. And I think, Robert, you mentioned earlier, there's so many different paths that people can find for their self-care or what feels really supportive. And so creativity isn't, or traditional art making and art journaling isn't going to be something that feels supportive for everyone. It might be a completely different path that someone's curious about. And I think having some sort of practice that we can shine a light or a mirror back on ourselves to learn more about ourselves, to learn how we are in relationships. Sometimes that mirror comes back from other relationships, not necessarily a practice from other people. I used to have actually a teacher years ago that said we were walking around the world with a squid on our face, and you'd have tentacles perfectly placed where you had no idea the squid was there. And the only way you really knew is because other people would say, "Hey, do you know you have the squid on your face?" So I just always find that really ironic. But there's so many ways to have a deeper sense of self. And I think that's really important.
And who would you like to ask? Well, you could probably pass it to Maria, but what question would you like to ask her to enhance that?
So we've been talking about setting goals and feeling stuck and having limited beliefs. I'm curious your take on this deeper sense of self that we have, or having a deeper sense of who we are. But then how can we be more intentional with some of those insights that we have, or how can we gain some of those insights in an intentional way?
Yeah, so I would say for me, in order to become intentional, I first have to become present, right? And so as part of what I teach through, for example, one of the things I teach is a mindful tasting process for wine and food, actually, becoming more mindful about our consumption. But with anything, and whether it's social media, and this goes for any age, right? So to kind of tie it back in a little bit on the theme of adolescence, our children coming through with technology and whatnot, that's, on my heart too. I'm a mom of two teens, a sophomore and a junior in high school. One of my clients is a behavioral health center. So I work with adolescents in both substance use programs and behavioral health programs. One of the things that I found as I, talk with some of those students is, as I ask them, what do they do for fun? What do they love to do? What is their hobbies? What is their, do they play sports? To Robert's point, the answer doesn't come. And so I think as I look at, something that I've tried to really instill within my parenting style, and granted, by all means, I do not have it all figured out. I'm the first to admit that. But in really holding space for and supporting them in discovering their passions and then supporting them in pursuing them, what I've seen occur is that struggle then about the screen time, or, did you do your homework, or all that kind of dissolves, because there's this support system and there's this safety of being really open in terms of communication. I think that supports that. And doesn't mean that we don't have an occasional, me go knock on my son's door saying, dude, you got to get off. It's because I'm trying to sleep and my bedroom's right by yours. But for the most part, it's really taken those arguments as a parent out of the equation. I don't have to ask them if they've gotten their work done. I don't have to ask them to get off their phone, because they have learned what they're passionate about and they have interest outside of that. So I think, to go back to your question of how tapping, or how to get to that intentional piece, right? Having that internal to get to the intention, I think it really comes by learning how to become present. And so, at the start of the conversation, I think it was you, Cynthia, that said, take 3 mindful breaths, right? The breath is the most powerful tool that I've come across to get into the present moment. When we can become present, whether that's for what we're about to consume, let's say, or who we're about to communicate with, like this conversation here, or the project at hand, whatever it might be, then we have the ability to become intentional about our actions. Or if we're just going 100 miles an hour through life and not slowing down, to take a few breaths to center and to be in this moment, which is truly the only moment we have, right? If we don't take that time to do that, then it's really going to be hard to become intentional. For me, it all starts with becoming present. And then from there, you can step into the intention. And in terms of just to kind of piggyback off of the whole, how do we step into learning more about self, right? And understanding what our truth is, our big truth, right? So part of the practice or style that I teach, my training through my several different meditation styles with different meditation teachers, but the particular style that I practice and teach most often is one that incorporates 4 soul questions. And it's, I'm certified through Deepak Chopra's organization. And so we ask these 4 soul questions every time before we get still, right? Before we go into meditation. The answer can be different every day, right? Because we are different. We're evolving each day. And they're simple. And, I think when people start to ask these, kind of to Robert's point earlier, they might, I don't know who I am. Because the first question is, who am I? And then it's, what do I want? What do I truly want? And then it's, what is my purpose? And then what am I grateful for? And so if we pose those inquiries to self before we step into that inner world where we can actually tap into that, it kind of sets the framework, if you will. It primes the pump, right? So that when we do go into stillness, whether it's through the breath or through a mantra practice or whatever style it is, those answers are going to start to become clear. And I think that along those lines is then just the trust that when those answers come up and they surprise you or they seem too big, just leaning into them and having that, creating that space for yourself, right? So
there's almost a power of 3, like, who are you? Or who am I? I'm going to ask the question. I'm not going to pass it yet because I am going to talk about it. We're going to give our interpretation of 3 words put together that can create change. For example, when I was thinking about this question, mine were make a difference. Something that I have in my mind quite often is I want to make change in the world. I want to make a difference. And so when I was a teacher, it was one of the reasons why I became a teacher. I wanted to make a difference. I saw the teachers that did a really kick-ass job for me. And I was like, they made a difference in my life. I want to be that person for someone else. But then when I became a teacher, I learned how much you're shackled as a teacher, especially in today's world, past the curriculum. This is not even talking about the curriculum anymore. It's literally, there's teachers and there's schools that have scripts. Like, you have to read this. There is no individuality anymore. Teachers can maybe mix a little bit of it. But even when I was a teacher, I was in a district that didn't have scripts or anything. But yet my director, he was like, I want you to do this, not that. And so he wanted me to teach the way he wanted, yet it wasn't effective. And whenever he came in to say, hey, this is how I'm going to teach, and the kids just hated it. And I'm like, you have to move with the generation, similar to how I was talking about how you have Paw Patrol one generation, then you have Batman another generation. It's like you have to be relevant to where they are. And if you just say, well, this is where I was, they should be there too. We fail to understand generational mindsets. And I have that article coming out, I believe, next month in February, where I'm talking about generational mindsets, how one generation from like baby boomers all the way to our current generation, Generation Alpha, how they think so differently. And yet every generation, we always say, oh, the last generation, was stuck up or something, and this new generation is weak and it's a mess. And it seems like that is the next step. So the question that I asked myself, or answering the question, was, I want to make a difference. Those were my 3. But then I said, no, I don't want to make the difference, because I understand what make means. And then I said, I want to be the difference, because regardless if I can make or not make the difference, I can be the change that I want to be in the world, Rumi. Be the difference is my answer. And I want to pass that right back to Maria. What would be your 3 words to answer that?
And the question I'm answering is, what change do I want to make? Or what?
Yeah. Or basically, if you had to give someone advice along those lines, like make yourself happy, or, I'm just giving some examples now at this point, but you get to choose whatever 3 words resonate with you, that if you can only tell someone 3 words, it would change your whole entire life.
Okay. Your power. This is 4 words. You have unlimited. Yeah. No, it's still 4 words. Ooh. You are powerful. I think we really underestimate our personal power, our ability to literally turn up the genes that support health and turn down the genes that promote aging and disease. We have so much more power than we think, but because we are spending more of our time focusing on the external is telling us we don't have that power, right? It's by turning inward where we can really tap into it. And I truly believe with all my heart, every being on this planet has a unique capacity to heal. And we all have this amazing power to heal. It's just sometimes, it's been covered up, right? And so it's a matter of uncovering, right? Or remembering. So I mentioned the adolescents that I teach, and I use this a lot of times, no matter what it's adults or adolescents or anybody I'm teaching, but it's a reminder at the end of meditation that you are not broken. You do not need fixing. You just need a remembering of our wholeness and our power. So,
Perfect answer, I think, because we are powerful, and many people think that they're powerless. They think that they're not good enough, but yet they're perfect the way they are. If they want to make a change, they have to understand and accept the change that they're looking to make. And people have a hard time accepting who they can become when they're not the person that they want to become. The first step is to accept who you are, where you are right now. So if you look in the mirror, don't avoid your eyes. Look at look into your eyes. Many people just kind of look at their face like, oh, got some wrinkles. Oh, I got gray hair now. And you focus on those little things. But look in your eyes. Your eyes are going to tell you the full story. I can look at someone's eyes and I can see so much more than if they told me their whole entire life story. I can see the pain. I can see the struggle. I can see the happiness. I can see the joy. So we have to look for that in our eyes. And I think people have to realize that they are powerful. And one of the powerful things, or a powerful thing they can do today, is to look in the mirror and to acknowledge who they are, and to maybe even go a step further and say, what will I do to change today? Because I understand I am powerful. So what powerful step can I make? And I think that's a great point. Thank you so much, Maria. Robert, we're going to pass it to you. The same question. You only have 3 words.
Do the thing. Do the thing, and it'll work out. You'll either succeed or you will learn. There are no mistakes. There's only feedback. Just by doing that thing, whatever it may be, you will make positive progress. As long as you keep breathing, as long as you keep that idea of a positive mindset front and center, you'll make forward progress. And that's the funny trick to this, is it is not some huge effort. It is simply just believing that you can and doing the thing and knowing you're going to be bad at it and accepting that, and that you're going to get better at it, because you don't really start amazing at anything. It doesn't matter what it is. The first time you do anything is terrible. Even if you think you were gifted at it, give yourself a year and look back at that. You were terrible. It's accepting that with a smile on your face and finding joy in that process. Because as we've said before in this conversation, it's about the process. When you can find joy in the process, it doesn't even matter where you're going, because you're going to go somewhere good. And finding joy in that present moment, in the process, will take you where you need to go. And it will do that on a subconscious level, because when you are in that joy of the process, when you're doing that thing, it changes that reticular system that I spoke about. You come to expect that of your reality. Your world becomes something different. I say this from personal experience. I was I was not a great person for a lot of my life. Very negative, very unhappy, because I expected that. And I got it verified for me, because you tend to get verified, whatever it is you expect, and thinking that that was validation for the way that I thought, the way that I felt. And realizing that the actual opposite was true, that you actually determine what that is. And part of that determination, part of changing that mindset to something positive, something with growth, do the thing. Doesn't matter if it's get up a little early, doesn't matter if it's eat better food, whatever your thing is, you got to do it to actually make that progress, to take that first step. And it doesn't matter if it's tiny. Do the thing. Don't make an excuse. It doesn't matter if you think it's too small. It doesn't matter if you think it's negligible. It doesn't matter if you think it won't matter, because it will matter. Just do it. Do the thing. Begin to make it a habit. But it all starts with that intention. That intention has to turn into action. And you can want and you think and you can create a master plan that is absolutely bulletproof, and none of it will matter until you do the thing. You got to take the first step. You got to do whatever it is that you need to do. Just do it right now. Like if there's nothing preventing you from making that step forward, from doing that thing, just do it. Get it done. Put down your phone, go do it. I can't tell you how many things in life I've accomplished by finding myself sitting there mindlessly flipping through my phone thinking, man, I really wish I got this thing done, whatever it may be. And having that dawning realization of do the thing, put the phone down, go do it. That there's absolutely nothing preventing me from doing it other than just watching brainless things on my phone. Do a couple things. You'll go to bed feeling better. You'll wake up motivated to do more things. And eventually you put enough things together to have a real thing. And that's what progress is. That's what real working towards a goal is. It's not these grand gestures. It's not these like massive strokes of the pen. It's just the little stuff that adds up over time. That's it. And it all starts with do it. Do the thing. Do one random thing. Anything. Do the thing.
Very reminiscent of like Nike, just do it. Today, our generation, we don't see just do it anymore. We see the brand. The brand has grown so much just from those three words, just do it. Do the thing is very similar to that. But again, we see brand now versus the meaning behind something. So do the thing is definitely something that people can follow, understand, and implement into their life. What I would say to expand on that is when you are trying to be clear on what you want, to write at least the direction you want to go. So for example, let's say you want to be a career person. Say you want to have a profession you can love. It's so vague, but yet it's going to give you some direction you can walk toward that. If you say you're going to be a lawyer, then it's like you think once you're a lawyer, you're going to be happy. Or if you want to be a firefighter, you think you're going to make a difference. I have found if you want a profession that you can love and wake up every day and go into, then that's going to lead to more joy later on long term. Because how many people go to college, they get a degree, and they never use the degree? It's because they learned from high school that what they were going after wasn't what they truly wanted. It is almost like they just did what they were told. Oh, a doctor makes a lot of money. A lawyer makes a lot of money. And they fall into that. So give yourself more direction before you simply just do what you think is what you should be doing. Because even myself, I started off business, finance, accounting. I thought I was going to say, oh, this is going to be the job, making great money at that age. And then, so something happened. I was going into work and I was miserable. And I was just like, there has to be something different. So I gave myself direction instead of a goal. And so be the difference was that. And so it was teaching. Long story short, we can do that in our life too. You can do that in your life too. And then we get into Cynthia. What would be your 3?
What comes to mind for me is to be courageously curious. I think most of my growth has been on the opposite side of curiosity and of being curious in a way where there's not judgment. And sometimes where there is a rawness, a vulnerability, a courageousness in being willing to look at whatever that thing is internally or externally with potentially new eyes. And I think that's why I feel so connected with mindfulness and creativity practices, because they're a tool for me to be courageously curious. So that's what comes to mind for me.
We are going to be wrapping up, but before we do that, I would love for everyone to plug their business, their links, so people can follow them, find them, work with them, inquire about more work they have done, because I have had the opportunity to interview each of you individually. And I can say that the work that you do is needed, is necessary for the world. And we are at a pivotal moment in our world. I recently read a book, Tiny Habits. In the book, Tiny Habits, they talk about the best time to make a change is at the inception of something new. You have a new kid, probably a good time to make some change. If you're starting a new school year, for example, if you were a freshman, now you're a sophomore, it's probably a good time to make some change. If we are going into a new year, as I said, it is time for you to make a change. And if you're not uplifted by everything you do at every moment, okay, cool. Let's look at that. If you are uncertain of the direction you should be going in, ask us. Let's look at that, because we have a lot of questions within us, but yet we are afraid to ask for the answers. So I encourage you to reach out to these individuals here. Maria, would you like to start?
My website is take5.health. So rather than .com, it's .health, as a reminder that health is a priority, right? And take 5 in that, take 5 minutes throughout the day, or take 5 deep breaths as needed to get present. So you can catch me there. My handle on social is at Take5Health. And then I have a podcast I started this year. So we'll have to talk about having you on that, Michael, called Chakras and Chardonnay. And that is a podcast for wine lovers who want to step into more consciousnness within their consumption and improve their overall health. So I'd love to connect with any and all of your listeners. So I appreciate that, Michael. And thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure to connect with all of you guys today.
Thank you. I love the fact that you're having a podcast, because it's going to be like the best thing to listen to. Like if you have road rage, you better listen to Maria's podcast, because she has the best, calmest voice. And it's just like, you just fall in love. You're just like, that's exactly what you need, especially on the road. If people just don't know how to drive, especially if like you're in California, like it's crazy over there.
Right.
But Robert,
meditation at the end of each episode. So.
Oh, awesome. Great. This could be perfect. Robert?
So like I said, at the beginning, my practice is Twin Reven Solution. It is me and another individual named Sonia. I also have a book that I wrote kind of about a lot of the things that I spoke about today, called All in Your Head. And that is available on my website, as is any of my contact information, scheduling a consultation, anything like that. And again, that is twinravens.org, or you can just reach out to me directly at jparker@twinravens.org.
Perfect. I'll definitely throw that link there. And I'm excited for people to check you out, because the work that you do is definitely different than what people think, hypnotists do. Because a lot of people think, oh, they're going to put me in a trance and I'm going to start acting like a dog. And it's so far from that. We talked about it in our episode. But you really look at the subconscious and the unconscious mind. And right now, many people are in their conscious. They have a lot of goals that they want, but yet they do have to address that unconscious. And I think you're going to be a great fit for them. Cynthia?
Yeah, so the easiest way to find me is on my YouTube channel, which is Mindful Creative Muse. I have a lot of videos there. My website at mindfulcreativemuse.com. I have different articles and book recommendations. I have a 10-page workbook that has different journaling prompts and a way that you can identify what sort of steps might support you for self-care. And then on my site, I have information about my courses and teacher trainings also. So that's mindfulcreativemuse.com.
Perfect. I love when someone has stuff on their website, because you can go check it out. You can go through it. And I love the aspect and the process of journaling, because you can truly find the answers. I find that when we are writing down things initially, it's the things that society says, oh, we have to be strong. We have to be masculine, for men at least, right? And we're being this person, right? But then we truly get down after we got all the other stuff written on paper, the journaling process. we get down to our truth. And what I want for everyone to do this year, because we have a full, 12 months ahead of us, is to find your truth. What truth do you want to represent in the world? There's going to be so many obstacles in this coming year. We have an election coming up here in the States, and it's big on mindsets, and it's big on people, and it creates divide. People are upset because of differences. We have to understand that we are one people. We are people who should learn to respect and be cordial to other people's opinions and beliefs and dialect. As you can see here, we have 4 individuals that we all have different mindsets, but yet we can come together, collaborate, and instill some wisdom for anyone listening, for anyone trying to make a change this year. It begins with one step. We talked about it so much on the podcast. A small step at a time can make a big difference. I want to thank each of my guests today for coming on, spending some time with me, and making this group episode an amazing episode. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching Group 4 of Coaching in Session. We had another wonderful episode bringing in the new year with a positive mindset, with a positive shift in the podcast, bringing on other coaches who know what they're doing, who have helped countless people at this point get into a new type of mindset, into a new way of thinking, and into a new life. I encourage everyone to check out these wonderful guests, Maria Mays, Robert J. Parker Jr., and Cynthia Hauk.